Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Hyde Park Town Hall for our third public information meeting on our Route 9 Sewer District project. Thank you very much. You know that we've been talking about sewer in Hyde Park for about 20, 30, 40 years, something like that. And over the last number of years, the town board has really honed in on how we bring this vital infrastructure to our town core. And, you know, it's been a long researched project beginning 2014 or so with a NYSERDA grant to prepare a whole plan for how we make this area vibrant. So, you know, I grew up here in Hyde Park, as many of you did, and as many of you property owners have had the long view on Hyde Park. And, you know, I think for people like us who have lived here for many years and love the town, and especially for new people who've arrived and see this incredible vision for Hyde Park. And the question has always been, why haven't we lived up to our potential? Why do we have these incredible assets like the Culinary Institute and the FDR Estate and Vanderbilt? And why do 30,000 cars a day go by the Route 9 and Pine Woods intersection, and yet we still don't have those vibrant businesses that we would love to see? So, you know, many people long before me have pondered that question and really honed in on the lack of infrastructure. So, you know, basically what we've done is created a vision for this vibrant downtown that will not just benefit the business owners and the property owners, but will benefit the entire community in terms of tax revenues and bringing our commercial tax base up. So, and in addition to that financial benefits, it's just the kind of place people want to live. You know, it's really been determined that having a pedestrian-centered environment with commercial entities that line your corridor can really produce results. And so I think that all of you will agree that if you're here and if you've owned property for all these years, that you also share that vision for a brighter future for Hyde Park. So, you know, what we've done over the last couple years is work with Delaware Engineering as well as other consultants to develop a plan, and we call that the Hyde Park Downtown Initiative. And that's basically a three-pronged plan that includes sewer infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure, as well as zoning. And so we've been working on all those items in parallel over the last few years. And so our consultants have pulled together some images of what we believe Hyde Park could really look like, and except only if we have sewer, because as you know, you really can't have that density of uses. You can't have the wet uses without that. So we've really focused on creating those pedestrian improvements, and as many of you know, we started that a few years ago and implemented those. We have a second project that we will be building in 2020, and so we've made a lot of progress as well in terms of putting the details together, and I'll shortly hand this over to Mary Beth Bianconi from Delaware Engineering to review those. So thank you all for coming. We're going to get into the greater detail on the infrastructure as well as the cost to you, and there will be ample time for you to ask questions and really dig in. And at the end of the presentation, we'll also give you hours that you can come in and have a one-on-one talk with myself and Pete Sotero, the town engineer. So with that, I'm going to hand the microphone off to Mary Beth Bianconi, and thank you all, and we'll be talking very much in the future regarding your particular property. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mary Beth Bianconi. I'm a partner at Delaware Engineering, and we've had the pleasure and the honor of working with the town of Hyde Park for the last couple of years to try to bring to fruition a more vibrant downtown area. And as the supervisor said, we started this with a study that was funded by the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, which is focused on how to improve quality of life, reduce environmental impact, and enhance the economy. So this area that we're looking at here is this sort of focus area of that study. In terms of sewer infrastructure, we looked at a larger area because we wanted to make sure that we were capturing as much economic vitality as we possibly could. And really quickly, I just want to point out, and I say this every time I'm here, so for those of you who've heard me talk before, sorry for the repeat, But it's very unusual that we have a community that's at this point in their process that has accumulated over $5 million in grants towards a project like this. That's very unusual. Normally, we spend a lot of time planning, we talk about spending a ton of money, and then we go try to figure out how to finance it. And in this case, the town has been extremely proactive, and that's one of the reasons I think we've gotten to where we are today. So the part of the process that we're in right now is forming a special improvement district, which is a taxing jurisdiction, which is necessary in a town to allow a project like this to advance and be financed. And that part of this process is also being funded by a grant that's supported by Dutchess County. So folks are very lucky here. Normally, communities have to front all of this money and figure all these things out on their own. But there's been a lot of hard work to get to the point where we are. So I just want to quickly point that out. And as the supervisor said, there's a bunch of other things going on in terms of sidewalk improvements that are also being funded through grants. Very proactive way of looking at things. And the last thing I will mention is some changes in the zoning of this area of the town to encourage that vibrancy. And I'll just go back to those 2 slides. This is not Hyde Park, you can tell. But this is a vision of what you can have when you have the infrastructure and the zoning that supports this type of an urban, semi-urban environment. Those are all commercial structures, including this one down here on the bottom, which is particularly nice, a standalone commercial structure. That looks old, it's new. And then the other slides here were of residential properties. Again, kind of that density concept that we can't really bring to fruition without a sewer system. So you all have received a letter from the town that outlined preliminary costs. And I want to emphasize the word preliminary. We're still early in this process and we're honing in on a number of things. One of the things that some of you may have gotten in your letter was it said for sewer rent, which is the part of it that pays for operation and maintenance, is based on the amount of water used. Some of them said 0, and that's because we need to update the water use information that we get from Dutchess County. We're in the process of doing that right now, so there'll be additional information coming down the pike. The other thing to know is that the components of that cost, we separated them out so that you could see them. One portion is to fund the debt. This project will have debt. There is no such thing as a 100% grant-funded project on this scale. So there will be debt service. And we've taken into account the capital grants that we have that would go towards reducing that cost. And we've predicted an interest rate. Now, I'm not, I don't have a crystal ball, I can't guess, but we've tried to come up with what we think is reasonable. We have also tried to be conservative, not crazy, not, excessively expensive, but conservative enough that we're trying to give you a realistic idea. And the debt service has been, we looked at across the district area. Another important point here is if property is not located within the boundaries of the district, you are not paying for this project. I'm going to say that again. If your property is not located in the boundaries of the district, you are not paying for this project. So people get real confused about that. But in New York State, in towns, the only folks who can fund a project like this are those that are located within the district. So what we've done for debt services, we've looked at, it's a commercial corridor. It's primarily commercial. There's a very, very few residential properties. If you're a commercial property and you're on Route 9, that frontage has value to you as a commercial property. So the debt service has been calculated based on the size of the property, the acreage, because that has to do with what could be built there, as well as the footage along Route 9. Recall that, and I do encourage you to be engaged in the town's process to review the zoning for this area, but the concept will be that the zoning will be intended to encourage a reasonable amount of density, good return on investment in these properties. So that's kind of part of the process here, the thought process of how that debt service is distributed among the properties. And then the other component is something called a sewer rent, and we have to pay to operate and maintain the system. And so there's a cost associated with doing that. And that cost fluctuates to some degree based on how much water is being processed. We've taken a cut at what an initial district would look like in terms of the flow that would come to the treatment plant, come up with an annual cost for that, and that's divided out among the users based on proportion. How much water are you using? So those are the two components. We're looking to refine those, so that's a stay tuned. You'll get more information as we go down the road. Eventually, and you'll keep hearing this, there's something called a map planning report, the mythical map planning report. It's going to be a little document that's going to lay out all the things that we've been talking about, but is going to very specifically say what the costs will be. And that's what will be subject to the next steps in this process, which are outlined here. So we're in that green box over there, map planning report, district boundaries, so who's in, who's out. We're still refining those as well. User cost calculations, as we just discussed, and the project scope and scale. So it'll describe what kind of infrastructure is being built, how it will serve the properties, how the properties are benefited and improved by that infrastructure. That'll all be laid out in this document. That's a public document that will be subject to environmental review under the State Environmental Quality Review Act. There'll be a public hearing that will be conducted, and anyone can come to the public hearing, whether you're in the district or not, just like all public hearings. But clearly, those who are in the district are the most germane comments that can be made. And then the town board will make a vote. And their vote will be looking at the map planning report and comparing it to the statutory requirements to create a special improvement district, which, remember, at the end of the day is really a taxing jurisdiction. It's a way to say, you're going to have a thing and we got to collect money from you to pay for it. And the town board's vote is going to have a couple of very basic things. It's going to say, is this in the best interest of the public, right? Does this make sense, right? Is it in the best interest of the public? Good for the health, safety, welfare, economy, all of those kinds of things. That's one finding that they will have to make, yes or no. Are the properties that have been included in the district boundaries benefited by the project? Will they see a benefit? Will their property values improve? Will they be able to develop their properties in a more sound or more economical way? That's a finding. And then, are there any properties that we haven't included in the district that are benefited and should be included, or the other way around? Do we have any in the district that aren't benefited and shouldn't be in there? Those are the findings that the board will make. That's the vote that they're taking. So they will take that vote. And then now we're at sort of the branch in the road. There are options what happens next. Under this type of a proceeding, the automatic option is that this finding that the district is in the public's interest could go to a referendum vote of the people in the district, the property owners in the district, and it could either be done based on a petition of those property owners or automatically. And what the town has done and has done all along is be very, very transparent in this process. And they want to make sure that this is something that folks thoroughly understand. And while we may not all be happy that it costs money to have this kind of infrastructure, to understand that this is the proposition that's before the people, the property owners within the district. So there will be a referendum vote. I'm going to talk about how that works in just a second. But there will be a vote. It's called a mandatory referendum. The town board will submit this to the folks, the property owners in the district. Assuming that that vote is a positive vote to form the district, our next steps in the process are there's a review by the Office of the State Comptroller. They make sure that the process has been done properly, that we've considered the costs properly, that we've notified the property owners of those costs. That's that process. That takes several months to get through. It's a documentary process with a lot of back and forth. Once we're through that process, then the district is considered officially formed. There's some paperwork that gets exchanged. And then that opens the door for us to do a bunch of things. One is to actually design something. So far, we've done preliminary work to figure out what we need to do, but we're nowhere near y'all, seeing those giant rolls of construction plans. We're not anywhere near that stuff yet. That's a big investment, and we need to know a lot before we get to that point. So that's that design, financing, permitting, and design chunk, and you'll see that takes, a long time. It's a year. It's something along those lines. It's because it's a very detailed process. In terms of where the sewer lines will go, how will connections to properties be done, are there permits that are needed for, say, crossing streams or being near wetlands, those kinds of things. That's that process. And then obviously this project is subject to public bidding. So there'll be that process and then building something. So we're looking at building something in 2021, 2022. It's a while from now, but that's a pretty typical timeline. So that vote. Right now, it's targeted for June of this year, and there's a series of timelines that we have to meet in terms of notice and things. So June's a realistic timeline given that we're sitting here in January. Voting is conducted the same way any other election is conducted. So it's just like if you were voting for town board or any other election that you might, federal election, any other election that you might participate in. It's a simple majority vote of the total number of people who vote, who are qualified to vote, meaning property owners in the district, to approve or disapprove this action. And so it's only property owners within the district boundaries, and you'll know because you've received a letter, you'll know, we'll have a list, people can compare. And then here's how it works. Single owner, single property, one vote. Corporation, LLC, partnership, no matter how many members, one vote. And then this is the one that gets people a little confused. If you're an owner of multiple properties within the district, you only get one vote. So you can own 5 properties, I'm Mary Beth, I own 5 properties, I still only get one vote. And that's we didn't make that up. That's what the state law says. So we have to follow what the law says. So that's how the voting works. And then this is actually the end of our presentation. Do you want to talk a little bit about the open house?
Can I just
Yeah.
add something? Can I have the microphone? Well, I'll be quick.
Absolutely.
I'm Emily Svensson. Thanks, Mary Beth, for going over all that. I just wanted to add that I think it was mentioned in the letter that you all received, but since there's a lot of new people here today, I just wanted to mention that if you want to review some of the things that we've gone over in the previous meetings, they're all online at the Hyde Park Downtown Initiative website. It's hpdowntown.com. And if you go to the wastewater page, you can see all the materials that we've gone through in the previous meetings, including a map of the district, the total cost and how that's all broken out. You can watch videos of the previous meetings. So that's all there. You can see pictures of what the treatment plant might look like. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that that's all available to you if you're joining us for the first time today. So thanks.
Okay, so as Mary Beth has put up on the screen here, Pete Sotero, the town engineer, where is Pete? He's here somewhere, and I are looking forward to having individual conversations with property owners because certainly you're going to have questions and really kind of want to hone in on what your responsibilities will be. So we do have some hours that we are going to be available. I just ask that you call my secretary and set up an appointment during that time because we just want to make sure that people are not stuck waiting while we're talking to one person or another. So, I would estimate that, plan on spending 15 minutes or so talking with us, asking us questions. And, this is just preliminary. So Saturday, January 26th, excuse me, I didn't mean preliminary. What I meant is that we will certainly be having more options for conversations later on, but this is just what we are setting up initially. So Saturday, January 26th, that's this Saturday, between 8:30 and 10. Tuesday, February 12th, 8:30 to 10, and then an evening time, 4 to 6 on Thursday, February 21st. So with that, I would just pass the microphone back to Mary Beth and ask that you, when someone asks a question, if you wouldn't mind reiterating it so that we have the recording.
You'll probably have to remind me of that, but I'll try.
Okay.
So questions? Yeah.
So my vote is going to be equal to some guy who just has an office.
That is what the state law says. We don't,
So
We don't-
I don't have a weighted vote.
we do not, that is,
My cost for the initial first year is $66,000. And the guy next to me, his cost is $500. His vote is equal to my vote.
that is what the state law says.
Now that stinks.
Yep, talk to your legislature. That's what the state law says, and it's been that way for a really, really long time.
I can tell you for a fact, if this goes through, this will put Capola's restaurant out of business. We won't survive. We've been in Hyde Park over 40 years, and $66,000 for my 2 properties, and I still get the same vote as the guy next to me that has a $500 a year cost. It's not gonna work.
Understood. Yeah.
So Mary Beth, maybe you reiterate that.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. What the person who was asking the question said was, is the vote of someone who their assessment for the sewer is substantially greater than, say, a neighbor, is it equal? And it is. It's one vote for every property, regardless of what the assessment is to that property for the sewer system. And it's recognized that it is a very, very expensive proposition. I just want to take a second to say, and if you haven't seen it, I know some of you have seen the presentations before. We showed eventually 3 different options for this district. We actually looked at many more than that, and I believe, and I'm not the right person to speak about this, but for the last how many ever years, numerous different options for how to get sewer to this area have been evaluated. And we have a challenge here. And I'm going to go back here to this picture. Here's our challenge, right? This is our commercial area, right? So, you know, you got McDonald's here in the middle. That's McDonald's actually. This is our commercial area. We looked at the potential of including this residential area because there's a lot of properties in there. And we said, well, is adding these guys, and take aside whether they want to be part of this or not, but just is the math of adding these guys, does it help? Does it help balance the cost for this area? Well, unfortunately, the answer is no. We have to spend more in infrastructure than we can bring back in revenue to support this. We looked at different kinds of sewer systems. We looked at different kinds of pipes. We looked at different kinds of treatment systems. We looked at, can we connect to somebody else who has a wastewater treatment plant? We looked at every possible way to look at this. We could not come up with a less expensive way to do this than what we have in front of us right now. Now, having said that, it is fully the town's intention to continue to seek a way to reduce the cost of this project. That is absolutely 100% the town's intention. Like I said, it's very rare that we have somebody who's accumulated a lot of grant money at this point in the process. Just for those who don't recall, this is about an $18 million capital project. We have about $5 million in grants. I'm using round numbers. It means we would be borrowing about $13 million. It's reasonable to think that the term of that borrowing is somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 years. Depending on the type of financing that the town can get, you're probably looking at an interest rate around 4%, 5%. That's what that debt service cost represents. That's what it's showing. And our challenge here is that, again, we're back to, we have to follow the rules. The rules say only the people who are benefited by the sewer system can pay for a portion of it. And we don't have a lot of people. That area, when you look on the maps, you'll see represents 108 properties. We're looking at, are there options where we can add some more that, again, bring some value without a commensurately higher cost? But it's a challenge. This is a huge challenge. And the pipe does not care how many people there are to pay for it. It costs what it costs. So absolutely recognize there's a number of properties here that have a very high burden. Absolutely.
Mary Beth, can you just, the district does go, although it goes further than this shows, just so people are
It
aware.
does. It goes to
It
Linden
Cranberry.
Lane,
Yeah.
if people are familiar. And it ends down here, not exactly. It ends before we get to this is the old drive-in. It ends before we get to the drive-in. So.
Mary Beth, I'll take the mic if you want to use the podium mic there. That way,
Ken, can I add one more thing to that?
sure.
No, I don't need the mic.
Well, it'd be good for people.
Okay.
Yes.
Just so everyone understands where I'm coming from, my 2 properties, end of February, I have to pay in land tax, $30,000 in land tax. My school tax is $57,000. Between that and the sewer district, I'll be close to $150,000 before I even open the door to any of my businesses. $150,000. Does everyone understand what that means? Now, people are telling me, well, look at the future. Look what this means. I would like to be a part of this future. If this happens, I'm out. I'm done. I won't even be able to sell my property because of the cost of running a business here. And I hope everyone understands that. These are real numbers. I'm not picking them. You could check my tax grid numbers and look at what I pay. Those are real. And it's not, taxes don't go up. Taxes don't go down, they go up.
I assume it's okay to make a statement and not ask questions at this moment? Okay, so forgive me, I don't have anything formal to speak on, but My name is Ron Hicks. I'm Assistant County Executive for Dutchess County. I focus heavily on economic development, and my good friend John Capola, who I've known most of my life. I just have a quick question for you, John. In the last, say, 27 years, has your business expanded? Are you making more money? Is your property worth more? And you don't have to answer that if you don't want to. But 27 years ago, I was at a meeting with Kelly Hardesty, who was, I think, 18 at the time. And
That was smooth, Ron. That was smooth.
I had just come out of college, and I was attending a meeting in Hyde Park, where I was born and raised. And the meeting was on sewer. And they were all talking about how desperately we needed sewer 27 years ago. And I thought, well, yeah, I didn't know too much about it. Like a lot of other people, we think sewer and water is a birthright. It's there. We get water out of the ground, and the sewer goes into the ground. But it's not. And so I come back to this community. I moved back 27 years ago. I work for the county. And one of my priorities at the time was to make sure that we focused on infrastructure. Because lack of infrastructure, contrary to popular belief, does not create sprawl. Lack of infrastructure can actually foster sprawl. And we've seen that in Hyde Park. And what I wanted to do was to go back to those communities that didn't have it and do everything we could to make sure that they did. So we expanded the Partnership for Manageable Growth. We did grant some money to the town. I also serve on the Governor's Regional Economic Development Council, where we made a case for infrastructure in upstate New York and how important that is, and Lydia serves on that with me. And Hyde Park, I think, benefited well over $1 million from that grant. And we're not done. I mean, I'm going to work closely, as long as I'm here, with the town to make sure that we seek other funds. But the problem is, and I asked John that question, because we see areas that lack water and sewer infrastructure just because of the code and all the other requirements and the environmental concerns, deteriorating. We don't see their businesses growing. We don't see their values going up. And I worry, and I have seen this around the county, where a business, John, if you were to go retrofit your kitchen or to sell your property, the value is going to be considerably less than it would if it had infrastructure, but also you may be required to go through the incredibly costly process of having to upgrade your system. And to all due respect to the professional services in the room, they nail you, and it's very expensive. So you really have to look at that. What will your property be worth in the future if you are able to sell your property? And is your business expanding? I do hope that this is a start for Hyde Park, that this particular corridor will lead, this investment will lead to other opportunities. I will tell you, in the county, we put a water line, we offered it up 3 years ago on an area, it's a commercial area, that didn't have any water infrastructure. And as soon as we announced that, we immediately filled a 244,000 square foot building that wouldn't have otherwise moved. So the values go up, the business increases, and as far as the county executive's office is concerned, we're going to continue to work with the town to find other grant opportunities and reduce the cost.
I have a problem about this. Let's say about I pay more 3,000. And I pay taxes at 16,000. I have income usually 55 to 60, and any year I pay out 55 to 60. And I don't know how I can make more, 3,000 more to pay that. I don't know. I don't know what I decided how to do it. Okay.
Okay, I've been working on this for a really, really long time, but when I got my love letter for $23,000 on a piece of property that has nothing on it, it was a little enlightening to me. I don't know how I'm going to pass on $2,200 or $2,500 to one of the tenants. Is at the consignment store, or we have one for $1,900, one for $2,200. These guys are paying like $13, $14 a square foot. Limited parking. It's a real oxymoron for me. It was a shocker. I really wished and hoped there would be some way we could get some more money to fund this, because my heart goes out to John Capola I totally understand. We've been sitting on this property in Hyde Park for 20-something years now. Have had some deals on it, not been able to go through for one reason or another. And it's going to be very difficult on a lot of people. We'll try our best to support it, but it's still very, very difficult.
Buddy, not all Hyde Park Methodist. I'm trying to get it, just anticipate a little bit about any additional costs other than debt and rent. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about maybe tie-in costs or, you know, where I'm coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and hopefully everyone heard the question. The question was, in addition to the cost for the debt service and the sewer rent, which pays for the operation and maintenance, what are the other costs of the system? So down the road, the town will adopt a regulation for how this district will function. There'll be rules. There need to be. So there'll be rules, and among those rules, it'll discuss things like how connections are made and those kinds of things. I will, since we haven't gotten there yet, I will tell you what typically happens in a situation like this, and know that this is what typically happens. Generally speaking, there are sewer mains that are constructed as part of the project. As those sewer mains go by properties, we work with the property owners to figure out, okay, where is the right place to put the connection, so the little line that comes off that sewer main onto your property. And that could be, if it's a property where it's unlikely that a lot's going to change on the property, even if the buildings were, say, redeveloped or those kinds of things because of the configuration of the property. It could be, where's the closest location to connect to the existing pipe that comes out of the building someplace to connect to the septic system. Because putting more holes in your basement is usually a bad idea. Stick with the one you have. So it could be that. It could be looking, if you're looking at a vacant property, where do you put this connection so that you could build anything there and you wouldn't have a sewer line in your way. That little connector part's called a stub. So typically the project pays for the sewer line and the stub to the property line. Then generally the property owner pays the cost to connect the building to that stub. So that's why it becomes important, and one of the parts of the process is to work with every single property owner to make sure that we are, A, reducing that cost of connection as much as possible by putting that stub where it's most reasonable, and B, also not foreclosing some future opportunity to build something, say you want to change the location of a driveway or something like that, to make sure that we're maximizing that. So that cost is paid for. There may be building plumbing involved, and that's one of the reasons why it's done by the property owner. There's a decision you as a property owner have to make about how you want to see your property develop. So typically that cost is covered by the property owner. Obviously it's a one-time cost. We do a lot of these types of systems. So what we often see happen is that local contractors are aware that there'll be a day when the sewer system will be ready to go and people will want to connect. And a lot of local contractors will say this is a great way for them to have a job in their local area, and they'll work with a lot of different property owners, so you're kind of getting almost a volume discount by working with them to get those connections made. That's typically the way that that's done. And there's notice that's provided and those kinds of things. In terms of cost per property, is very difficult to say because it depends on the property. If the building sewer where it is today is extremely close to where the main is going to be, it's going to cost a lot less because it's a lot less foot of pipe. If it's much farther away, then it costs more because it's variable. Haley wants to say.
Well, actually, just that I have complete empathy with you. I'm a property owner in other locations. I don't own any commercial property in Hyde Park, but I feel your pain. I really do understand what you're saying in terms of, meeting your expenses. It's a challenging world that we live in, and especially for the small landlords and small business owners, we have complete empathy for that. But, just really going back to what the town board was charged with, what we look at as our duty, is really to solve problems. That's what that's why we ran. It wasn't really to manage the very day-to-day details, which I'm sure you all understand what those mean to me. But, you know, it was really to inspire change and to solve problems so that we can really realize our assets and grow our town and become the vibrant community that we've all envisioned. But yet, you know, we have this dichotomy of thought. It's going to cost a lot of money. And so what the answer is to that is we're going to have to all figure that out. Every individual is going to have to look at their cost and what they expect they can do on their property. You know, a lot of it is really about potential, and John's particular cost is high because of having 11 acres, and so that really figured into the cost. You know, we do, and John has concerns because there are many very small properties that will be assessed a much lower value based on their property size and other factors, and yet they will still have a vote. But this is laid out by state law. It seems to us this is the objective way to really, are we really going to go forward as a community? Because if we're not going to do this, hey, it's okay. We're just going to be the kind of community that we are, and we should work on realizing those assets, but we have to realize that there is not going to be a better opportunity. It's just, there really isn't. We've worked for 4 years to put a plan together. We've examined all the options. Infrastructure is expensive. We will continue to work on grants. Unfortunately, as Mary Beth alluded to, one of the primary sources of grant funding cannot be awarded till we form the district. So, you know, I have a question that I'm going to ask our town attorney to look into, and it's something that Nick Cetera brought up a few meetings back, which is, you know, could the district be formed with some sort of caveat that if we don't bring it down to X cost that we won't go forward? I think that that's something that I'd like to explore, because, hey, we know we need more money, but yet we're stuck in this position. If we don't form the district, we can't apply. So yet you as property owners would like some sort of assurance that if we don't get X, then you won't go forward. So that's a question that we can explore internally and come back to you with. But, you know, again, I feel your pain. I want to understand what we can do to alleviate that pain in your particular instance. So I don't know what those options are, but, you know, we can also discuss those. And, you know, it is a moment in time for Hyde Park, and, you know, we will do our very, very best to bring more money in. So.
Can I just add something? I'm not sure if you mentioned this when you were going over the formula, but the way the formula works is that, as Mary Beth explained, there's the capital cost, which is the amount that you pay towards the borrowing to build the system, and then there's the sewer rent, which is based on your flow. The capital cost is really based on your parcel. It's based on the amount of acreage and the amount of frontage along Route 9. So if you build more on your parcel, that cost doesn't go up. That cost stays the same. So I just want people to understand that if you have nothing on the parcel, or if you have a lot of unused land, you could build more and your capital cost would stay the same. So I just want to make sure that's clear.
How many properties are within the proposed district, property owners, I should say, and do we know what the average assessment is for them?
So there are 108 parcels within the, so the question was, how many properties are there, and do we know what the average assessed value is? So there are 108 properties within the district. There are numerous folks, as Mr. Coppola said, who own multiple properties. We'll get that number, what that is. I don't have that off the top of my head. And I don't have the AVs off the top of my head either, although I can say a couple of things. That the average parcel size within the 108 parcels is 1/3 of an acre. That's the average parcel size. So while we have a few very, very large parcels, we also have a lot of really small parcels. And that's one of the challenges, because all of those little parcels have a little septic system on them. And so one of the things that was mentioned by Mr. Hicks, who's gone, was the cost of rebuilding a septic system. For some of these places, you may not even really have the option. You may not have the land to do it. and the costs are very, very high. When we were having public meetings during the summer, we had a number of folks, some of them are residences, but who live on the east side of Route 9, come and talk about their personal experiences. And we had one family talk about how they just spent $60,000 on their septic system for a house. 60 grand. That's outrageous. But they had no choice because they needed a septic system. So that's, again, as we think about this, and I think Emily, and that was one of the points that I was going to make. One of the things that has been surprising to me as we've looked at this is when we look at economic activity in an area, we can look at assessed values. The costs of this are not tied to assessed values. Certainly, what you pay in your taxes is, right? And the higher your assessed value, the more assessed value you generate doesn't change what has to be paid for. You're still going to have the snow plows and all the other things, but it does make the number less. Dollar per thousand goes down when the assessed value goes up. I mean, it's the same thing with the debt service here. If the debt service is $60,000 on a property and it's a vacant piece of property, develop that property and get 5 tenants to pay a chunk of that $60,000, it starts sounding a lot more reasonable. Understood that in the beginning, there isn't a tenant. That development hasn't happened. But I think, I was in Salem, which is in Washington County, way up near the Vermont border. If you've ever been to Cambridge, you're kind of in that area. Last week, they need a sewer system. They just got a water system in 2004, and they desperately need a sewer system, and they're kind of in the same boat you guys are. They're looking at, they had somebody come do a study. It was outrageously expensive. But in the words of the supervisor there, she said, here's the deal. We have nothing. We do nothing. We continue to have nothing. And if everybody's okay with that, then that's good. But then you have to stop complaining about what your taxes are. You have to stop. And I'm just telling you what she was saying. I think you're kind of there. You guys have been talking about this for how long? So costs of stuff go up as time goes by. Absolutely understanding that these are very, very high costs. Very high costs. Somebody in the office asked me, have we seen costs like this? And we do. We see them in some communities. It's a tough burden.
What's the average cost per property?
We haven't done an average, yeah. I mean, it's so variable because it's the size is really impacting it and the amount of frontage. But, I hope you don't mind me asking you, Kelly, but I know that you have properties throughout the county, and you mentioned, $14 a square foot for your consignment store. Would you say that in other locations that are able to command a higher rent? The locations that have the...
That's a difficult question because it depends on what kind of community we are in. We don't do that much retail anymore.
Because
yeah.
yeah.
The shopping center gets more per square foot, but again, there's no sewer and water there, but the traffic count, the population, this is a community, the population is increasing. That's part of it that makes me a little bit nervous about it.
Ron, actually, Ron, what?
Yeah, well, first let me apologize to professional service providers.
Why, did you get a text?
I sent one. There's a very good reason.
Text message.
I'm sorry.
It's like-
There's a very good reason why these individuals have to
All
get
right, Ron,
involved,
it's
and that's
okay.
New York State statute and the mandate that we are under in the health department to enforce these. And it's a very expensive time process. If any business has to go and redo their septic, there's a 2-month initial review time in the county health department alone. That all costs money, and your number on 60 is dead on. I mean, if you ask Nick Sotera what it cost him just to make those improvements, I know he's been in the health department for months. So that's very
Absolutely.
important. And then, 27 years ago, if this had been done, it'd be paid for by now.
Yes.
And if you do want a more vibrant Hyde Park, Rhinebeck, the village of Rhinebeck has sewer. I can't do business attraction in Dutchess County unless there's infrastructure. It doesn't happen. It's the first thing they check. You need sewer water. So there's empty spaces, very small empty spaces that will not get filled, will not be highest and best use for those spaces. They will be what you see now, and you will not get vibrancy here. Also, the reason why the the population's declining, that's happening all over New York State, but there are communities in Dutchess County that are growing significantly. This community is declining because of, it's a beautiful place to live, it's where I grew up again, but there are things here that don't exist here that exist in other communities. So you see areas, if you see the areas that are growing, that are populating, those are areas that have infrastructure, that have things to do, walkable downtowns, and you've done a great job with the sidewalks, and this administration has done more than anybody in my memory to advance this. So it's something that's going to take some time. The county's completely committed towards this. We do see this as necessary. If you want to wait another 27 years, I don't know if I'll be here, but things will not change. So if you're happy the way things are, that's great. But if you want to see a more vibrant community that you're proud of, if you want to see your property values go up, if you want to see your business go up, if you want to see more attractive uses and tenants, you need infrastructure, unfortunately.
Well, we really appreciate your words, Ron. Thank you for your kind words. And we appreciate your perspective because you're doing this all over the county. And I wanted to congratulate you on the big win with IBM. I'm sure you had something to do with that. No? well, just take credit anyway. But anyway, hey, you know what? I'll get to you, Kelly, but we are seeing a tremendous change in our population. We have many people that are looking at Hyde Park for second homes. That was not happening 5 years ago. And I see a couple of people in the audience that have just moved here and see this potential. And they're bringing a broader perspective. And you know, I would say the most frequently asked question that I get, I'm sure you could guess, is, you know, why are there so many empty buildings in Hyde Park? And you know what? Actually, there's a conspiracy theory that goes around that it's the town board who keeps them out. And I'm like, why would I do that? I hate groceries. I mean, you know, I don't like shopping. I love seeing ugly buildings. No, that's ridiculous. It's because we don't have the ability for those businesses to come in. How many times have people said, I wish I had another restaurant to go to, a cafe, I want to have a coffee in Hyde Park. But, you know, there's not that many options. So that is where we are, and we have done all our homework. I wish there was a different number. We made another application through the CFA this year, and we didn't receive the monies. And the feedback was that the state feels they've put enough money into it. Okay, because Sue Serena was able to bring in $2 million. We were able to obtain $1.5 million through the EDC. So that's $3.5 million the state is contributing. They feel like that's enough at this point. So. You know, we are still banging on doors. We're going to the federal government. Ron's still here. We're going back to the county for another $500,000. I didn't tell him that yet, but you know, we're going to keep at it. But it is a moment in time. The Hudson Valley is on people's radar, and yet we are still not capitalizing on it. So. But that doesn't remove your experience of having to write those checks. Ron, yeah.
On the agenda right now that might be developed or anything happening that would...
The question that Kelly's asking is, do we have anything on the radar in this particular area, Kelly, you mean?
Anybody that would contribute. I mean, it's nice to see the hotel go up.
Yeah, and you know, that I agree with you, like, I know where you're going with that, because if we did have a major project coming in, that would be really helpful to drive it. But, you know, we have our planning board chair. I don't know of any particular applications, major applications.
Yes, those are on, Michael.
Yeah.
So in the sewer district right now, we don't have anything that I'm aware of coming up. But I do want to point out something that I hear often. Grand Union, the old Grand Union people, now that plaza is redeveloping, and they're about to start on the front building where Verizon Wireless was, and it's going to look great. It's revitalizing that section of town. Grand Union cannot be utilized. Let me say that one more time. Department of Health has taken a very strong position that it's stuck there because there's no septic capacity left. When they upgraded the buildings, the existing septic that's there was upgraded slightly. The Department of Health was very kind to let them do what they did. But we're going to have that hulking building there unless we have some sort of sewer. The site you see right across the street here that people see when they first come in right across from the Vanderbilt estate, I've had people look at this over and over again. The septic there is going to need to be completely redone, and you're probably looking at $150,000 now for that cost because of what could go there, the size of the property. In other words, if we don't have sewer, you're going to continue to have these aging buildings that there's not really anything anyone can do with it because the cost, the startup cost, as John would say, is prohibitive in terms of what you can make back on renting through square foot for retail, et cetera. So part of this would be that one of the reasons why I don't have much new, except for the redo of the buildings right at the Pine Woods intersection, because there's not, with lacking infrastructure, your startup cost to do anything is really, really, really high. There's an 11-acre parcel that there's a little bit of frontage between the old, I think it's Insurance now, was an antique store, Kings Highway Antiques. But that parcel that it abuts Pine Woods, that's a huge parcel. There's nothing that's going to be done with it unless we have infrastructure, I can guarantee you, because it's basically rock. And you could grade it, but you're not going to be able to get a good septic system in there because you can't get perk. So if you want to see infill in through these areas, I think that sewer is the only, commercial sewage is the only way to go forward. And, you know, I personally pay it like $22,000 in taxes here every year. I don't have a business that I can defray those costs on. But I believe in investing in the community myself, and therefore that's why I always vote yes on the school budgets, et cetera. Because I think that Hyde Park is an attractive place, particularly right now. Pete and Aileen can tell you, there's a developer named Ken Carney that I've been chasing since I met him 10 years ago. And I do mean chasing. And every time I'd see him, he'd say, not until you have sewer, not until you have sewer. We ran into him at a conference at Pace last year in November. And the first thing he did to me was said, hey, come on up, I hear you might be close. Let's talk. Pete set up a meeting, and we got, the supervisor and I got to go through, he's the one developing, he and his son, the artist lofts that are a kind of counter corner from Cooney and Hackett in the town of Poughkeepsie. It's a fantastic project. It's going to have a restaurant, a health club in it, a small health club, plus a green grocer, where you really need a green grocer in the city of Poughkeepsie. But how can he afford to do this? He's got infrastructure already. There's sewer there. And the idea that we're going to have people come in and making a huge investment in the community without infrastructure, it was said earlier, the first thing they do when they look is what's available. I mean, Ken would tell you as part of his presentation, he even says, is there a speedies permit there already? I mean, can we do a discharge of some sort? Because that's how important this is to further development of the community. Sorry for going on.
So you're all business people, so clearly you understand that the values are low in Hyde Park, right? The commercial values, if you wanted to sell your property at the moment, you wouldn't really be able to obtain the price you're looking for, most likely. And I think that you also understand how that translates to your values as rents, your cash flow. So I think that, you know, what our attempt to do is to really get to the heart of that issue, to increase your values, to increase your ability to rent, to attract vibrant tenants who will pay you more money, obviously. But I think that, you know, if there are other ways to do that, I haven't come across them, you know. So, and again, you know, the most frequently asked question I get, why so many empty buildings? The value of the properties like Pete's Famous, for example, you know, he's able, we have someone who owns that, who owns a restaurant in Hyde Park. He has purchased that, keeps it vacant, perhaps because he doesn't want to have competition, but, you know, he only paid $400,000 for that property. He's going to earn maybe, what, $20,000 a year on that? He can keep that property vacant at $20,000 a year cost to him and increase his business. I mean, again, maybe that's my conspiracy theory, but, you know, that's why we have these vacant spaces that are just not generating the people that we'd like, the vibrancy that we'd like. So that's why we're trying to get to the heart of it. So.
And I'd just like to add, I'm Ken Schneider, I'm on the town board. This is our 8th year in office, and I would hope that the business community has seen a big change here in Hyde Park under the leadership of Aileen Rohr. You know, we talked about the 3-prong, you know, having walkable. We're doing what we can here to make the curb appeal better for the residents of Hyde Park and the business owners. And I truly believe that the residents here of Hyde Park would absolutely support your endeavors on increasing the zoning, having new businesses come in, having a vibrant downtown. That's what they want, you know, and that you see families moving into the, you know, the communities here. And you're right, Kelly, we are a dwindling community because we don't have that infrastructure. You know, I know for me and my wife, we would love to have a town where we can walk downtown, have a coffee, have a nice, you know, pastry. We don't have that here in Hyde Park, and we can have that here in Hyde Park. You know, I think we've done our job, you know, and at this point, it's really up to you guys. We've talked about sewer for, as you said, 30 years, Ron, and this is, at least we have a number. We have a plan, and now it's up to you guys. Before, we've never had that here in Hyde Park. So we got to this point all on grants and hard work from this town board. So at this point, you know, I'm looking forward to meeting with the residents along this 108 properties. Yeah, is it going to hurt? Absolutely. You know, I'm actually in the process of doing a kitchen remodel, and it hurts. I'm like, oh my God, it really hurts. But, you know, I'm looking for long term. And I hope the business properties along Route 9 can see that their property values will increase. You can increase what you can put on those properties. And I hope that you can take into account the community that lives here, that they deserve better as well from our business owners. So.
I just want to add one thing as I was listening to everyone talk, something that and I've known Ken Carney for a really long time. I worked on a lot of his projects, and that is he calls me because I'm the sewer lady. So it's the first phone call he makes, and he says, do they have sewer? And I'll go, no, or yes. And he'll go, okay, well, no, thanks. When can we have lunch? Nice to see you. Bye. I'm not kidding. It is that simple an answer for him, and the reason is because of the way he does his projects. And this kind of gets to what I wanted to talk about for a second. One of the things that Michael said was the project that Ken is doing in the town of Poughkeepsie is like the one he's doing in Beacon. If you're familiar with Beacon, right next to City Hall, he's doing a project there as well. Those are mixed-use projects. It's not strictly commercial, and it's not strictly residential. And that's one of the things that don't you know, when we think about like the school taxes, right? School taxes here are very, very high. Enrollment is going down. Investment in the school is going down, right? This is a problem. You have to have families here that are going to put kids in that school that are going to be willing to invest in it. So this is, it's you know, we're all kind of looking at it very like this is a commercial thing. Well, it is, but it's also about residential as well, and giving people an opportunity to come and live in a community and live where they can walk down the street and go to coffee, because that's the vision for this, is that it would be that mixed-use community of all of those different things. I guarantee you will not get it through the Department of Health to put housing here. It's not going to happen. You're just not going to get it because the environmental constraints are too high. So it's a lot of different things. I just want to make sure people are also thinking about that. It's easy to think about restaurants and shops and things like that, where that square footage thing can be kind of tough. But if you start adding in that mixed use, you start adding in residential. The other thing that does for somebody like a Ken Carney is it opens a whole nother set of financing options that don't exist if you're just building, say, a grocery store. Because there are programs that are designed to help reduce the cost of rents to people so they can live here. And these are families with little kids, people who work in your community or work in the area. So it's that big picture let's go with this. If it could happen here, it already would have. Because it's a very attractive community in many, many ways. My geography, I work in Plattsburgh over to Watertown, down through the Rome, Utica area, over to Binghamton and the whole east side of the state. So I drive about 45,000 miles a year. So I'm in lots and lots and lots of communities. And what I see is where it can happen, it will, because all the right ingredients are there. It's like making brownies, right? All the right ingredients are there. This is an incredibly attractive community for so many reasons, but it's not happening. And it's easy to say, oh, well, one thing or another. But when we look at what are those ingredients that make it happen in a community, one of them that the town has identified is zoning, to make sure that we have zoning that encourages development, but that also protects property owners. So you need to know that you're going to invest a lot of money, that your investment's protected. But the other thing is infrastructure. It really is. Infrastructure is the basis of everything. So I just wanted to add that, make sure we're also thinking kind of, as Michael was saying, kind of that big picture. It's more than just $13 a square foot to run a retail shop. It's hopefully above that you can put an apartment,
Amy, I know you touched on very briefly some of the grant opportunities that you're looking for, and I know it's very hard to talk about hypothetically, you really can't, but
right.
What other opportunities that you know
Well, I think Mary Beth can answer that, or Emily, yeah, sure.
Here, you can use this.
Oh, yeah, good idea. Yeah, it's a good question. So the question was about what grant opportunities are still out there. One is that New York State has the water infrastructure grants, and we've looked at that and talked with our representatives, and they've been very encouraging about that. You're only eligible to apply for that once there's a district. And that grant would cover 25%, correct me if I'm wrong, Mary Beth, 25% of the amount that isn't already covered by grants. So you subtract out the grants you already have.
Up
and
to
then
up to $5 million.
Mhm.
So it's 25% up to $5 million of whatever's the balance. So we'd be right now, round numbers, we're at 13. So it would be 25% of the balance, up to $5 million would be eligible through that program.
Right, so that, I mean, that I think is, it's not a sure thing because those grants are really aimed more at places with water quality problems. But it is something that we feel we have a good chance at, but only after a district is formed. Some other opportunities, we've talked with the Hudson Valley Regional Council about the federal ESD funding.
EDA.
Sorry.
EDA.
I should have just let you the EDA funding, which is a federal program, and they like to sort of fill a gap in funding where you have most everything put together and you could drive economic development, but for a gap in funding. And so they've looked at it and they've said, well, maybe, I think again, they want to see us being closer to pulling the trigger before they would commit their funds. But that is another funding source that we're considering. We've looked at the USDA rural development, which I know Red Hook has taken advantage of. We've gotten the answer back a couple times that our population is too high to qualify for that. So I don't think
It's the population threshold's 10,000.
Yeah.
You guys are way over 10,000.
We kind of hoped that maybe they would look at just, part of the town, or there would be some way around that, but that doesn't seem too likely. So, those are the programs that are out there. And then, as Aileen said, the county has, I don't want to put words in Ron's mouth, but he did say he was going to help us. The county has made funds available in the past, and we have gotten 500,000 of the $5 million that we have is from Dutchess County. So we would consider applying to that program if it comes out again. So I think those are the main programs that are still available to us.
That is the first time the county has ever invested in another municipality's infrastructure. So it's a real test case that we're hoping is successful. I just want to make a point about other opportunities. There's no guarantees, but I challenge anyone to find anywhere in the region or the state where a town or local municipality, a county, and a state, and in this case, a priority project of the region, have all been working together towards one. That'll really resonate well with those who are reviewing the grant applications. Also, we've kind of been doing some behind-the-scenes work with Scenic Hudson. I'm really grateful for their connections and their support. They are very supportive of this project, and we've been kind of beating up the EFC for, I'd say, maybe 4 years, trying to get them to understand that, yes, they do award communities that are distressed and where there has been a system is broken down. But what we're trying to make the case is that this is being proactive and trying to prevent that from happening in our community. So, John, if your system or Kelly, your systems were to fail, it's going to be incredibly costly, and then that's when they may step in if there's any money left over. But we've been making that case, and I think they're hearing that. And I think also this governor has been putting some money into infrastructure.
And I just wanted to add one more thing, and Mary Beth can fill in the details, but one thing that I don't think we've factored in yet is the potential lower interest rate that we could access if we if we took part in the Environmental Facilities Corporation's funding program. If we borrow through them, we might be able to access a lower interest rate, which isn't a grant per se, but it would bring down the cost of the borrowing.
Right, and that if you look at your own borrowing for anything, a car payment, a mortgage, anything, interest rates have a huge impact on what you pay. So what we've done is we've used what we're calling a market rate borrowing. It's what you could reasonably bond the project for today. There's a couple things to think about. you guys are all business people, you're probably all watching the financial news like I do, and you're seeing when the Federal, Reserve meets and they say, oh, interest rates are going to go up. That has a direct impact on the bond market. So know that, we had a period of almost 10 years where we had bond rates that were almost zero. For all practical purposes, when you consider the cost of money over time, they were zero or negative numbers. That is not the case anymore. We are starting to see the bond market respond to the change in interest rates and those kinds of things. So, so the more time goes by, the more we have that risk of a higher interest rate. To Emily's point, we can compete for subsidized financing. And the way that program works is it is a competition. We are competing among others. So the program divides communities out by really tiny little communities, medium-sized communities. New York City, they get their own category, and then there's a couple of other categories. We're in that medium-sized community range. The nice thing is competition's a little smaller than if you're in the small community range, but it is still a competition. And the competition is based on public health and the environment. Also ability to pay. So, if we have a city like, say, Newburgh, who would be in there's a competition for us, right? Their ability to pay is surprisingly significantly less than ours. So they compete better. But they already have a sewer system. So they're kind of ahead of us in that respect. So it's competitive, but what it does is it's 50% subsidy of the borrowing. So if it was 4% at market rate, it's 2%. That makes a gigantic difference in terms of costs over time, in terms of what you pay back for bonded debt service. So we will be competing for that. Again, that's one of those ones we can't compete until we have the district formed. But that's something that we certainly will be doing.
So unless there are any more questions, I think we should wrap up. Again, we will have some office hours, so to speak, where we'll meet with anyone who would like to talk about this, any property owner. And we plan on hosting an additional meeting. I don't know that we have set that date yet, but we will continue to communicate by letter, although we love when people leave their emails, or they could even send those to me at aroar@hydeparkny.us, so that way we could be sure to communicate very easily and give updates. So just the last item on the agenda is on February 25th, we will be doing a Hyde Park Downtown Initiative update as part of our town board meeting. That begins at 6 p.m. and we project it will go till about 8. And back to the 3 prongs of the stool, that one section will be the TAP project, the TAP B, as we fondly call it, to the pedestrian connection that's going from the south end of Park Plaza up to just a little bit north of the Pinewoods Lights. So we have obtained grant money for that project, and we're in the design phase, and the engineers, GPI, will be giving an update to the community and to those property owners. Then we will also have an update from Bonnie Franson, who is leading our rezoning effort for this area, and we're very excited about what's coming down the pipes with that. And so she'll be providing that, and then we'll just continue to give the sewer update at that time. So hopefully people will come and join us and watch us on TV and give us input as we proceed in trying to create a more vibrant Hyde Park. So definitely thank you all for coming, and I look forward to future conversations. So I don't know if did anyone else have anything to add?
Thank you.
Okay, all right, fine. Yep, thank you. We will.